So, it was a few months ago. I was lamenting how Oscar Piastri was not in the frame for a Formula 1 seat, despite winning every other championship there is to win in existence. I mean, I made a whole ass video about it, and to a lot of people, it was a mutual opinion that Oscar was meant for a berth on the Formula 1 grid. Yet, at the time, there wasn't any movement on that. Fast forward to the present day, and not only does Mr. Piastri have a seat, but the whole process of getting him onto the grid has entailed such a comedic series of blunders on one part, and a large wave of expectation for a dude who hasn't even turned a wheel in an official Grand Prix weekend yet. So, how did we get here? Well, that's what we're all here for, right? I know these title cards are passé, but I'm jet lagged to the gills and I can't think of anything better, so bear with me, please. Anyways, for those of you unfamiliar with this babyface assassin, I'll give you the skinny. This dude here, Oscar Piastri, is an Australian racing driver from Australia.
It's time to learn geography.
From the end of 2016 to 2021, he ran roughshod over his competitors in junior formula. Please revert to my original video for a more in-depth analysis of that time because
I will not be doing it again.
But to cut to the chase, he was vice champion in British F4 in 2017, was Formula Renault Euro Cup champion in 2019, FIA Formula 3 champion in 2020, and the FIA Formula 2 champion in 2021, which in and of itself makes him a winner twice, given how Formula 2 cars are unreliable cakes with uneven car performance and issues that won't be fixed provided this gob continues to make coin from it all. I'll get back on track here, shall I? With 3 of the most important junior formula championships won in succession, anyone who ever doubted this kid was now firmly put in their place. By the end of 2021, I was firmly put in my place. It was quite obvious that this dude had done what needed to be done to deserve a shot at the big time. So now it's time to talk about that big time. And for that we need to rewind a couple of years. In 2020, Piastri was signed up to the Renault Sport Academy. A little bit odd, considering their team is somewhat allergic to promoting their juniors. He was nonetheless given some opportunities to drive Formula 1 machinery and would remain with the team in 2021 when they rebranded themselves to Alpine now that Renault had decided to take internal combustion off their menu. After demolishing the Formula 2 field in 2021, he was given a shot in the Young Drivers F1 test in Abu Dhabi and, because both Alpine toilets were occupied for 2022, he was named as the reserve driver for Alpine heading into the 2022 season. Throughout 2022, Alpine would take an older generation car to tracks that Mr. Piastri had either not been to or otherwise needed some extra mileage on, and it did appear that in this time, they were shaping him as their wave of the future all or nothing prodigy, and that, much like John Hammond, they would spare no expense. But, much like John Hammond, the whole damn scenario would be tipped on its head thanks in part to a portly man who thought he could play capitalism.
Our lives are in your hands and you have butterfingers?
I'm totally unappreciated in my time.
Although the real start of this whole fiasco came about when, by the Spanish Grand Prix, McLaren's Lando Norris was struggling with tonsillitis throughout the course of the weekend. Needless to say, tonsillitis is not a hobby I'd recommend taking up, and there were doubts regarding Norris heading into the Monaco Grand Prix weekend. Will he race? Will he not? And if not, who's going to replace him? Stoffel Vandoorne? Nick de Vries? Will the lad Stevens? David Croft? The ghost of Tazio Nuvolari? Well, Alpine decided that it would be a nice display of courtesy to lend them Piastri should Lando still be crook in time for the Grand Prix. You know, and it would give Piastri some time in the car too, to blood him and, you know, get him ready for his time at Alpine. It did seem innocent enough back then, but it was also around this time that Zak Brown wasn't so much signing talent as he was hoarding talent. Eventually, one of these poor souls that signed up for them would only be able to drive the factory van, and about the time the contract comes into effect, would only be able to drive it to the dole office once McLaren goes belly up from spending too much freaking money on drivers. Yeah. Anyway, it did legitimately seem though that Alpine had a plan in place for Piastri, although the issue came down to the fact that Alpine already had 2 drivers. Whether Fernando Alonso or Esteban Ocon would get the boot in lieu of Piastri was anyone's guess, but Alpine knew what they wanted to do with Piastri. They had a roadmap there, but then this happened.
I hereby announce my retirement from Formula 1 by the end of the 2022 season.
This was a big deal because, I mean, apart from the obvious, a 4-time world champion retiring from the sport, it left a seat vacant at Aston Martin. Some thought it might go to Pierre Gasly, maybe to Nick de Vries. No, It went to Fernando Alonso. It was totally out of the blue and completely left Alpine with their pants down. Although what it did mean was that Alpine now had a vacancy in their outfit. It did seem set in stone that Mr. Piastri was finally going to get a shot at the big time. Hallelujah friggin' Luya. On August 1st, this would be confirmed. Alpine putting out a press release that Oscar Piastri would be driving for the Alpine Formula 1 team from 2023 onwards. It was just, for he had deserved the shot. He was now to get it. Praise be that Oscar Piastri was now a Formula 1 driver. But then, perhaps the most unexpected thing in the whole history of history happened. He basically told them in front of the whole world that, nah, I don't want your damn seat. It seemed completely harebrained to reject a Formula 1 seat, and to do so publicly, to not so much burn a bridge, but to blow the damn thing up. This made news headlines around the world because, I mean, just how? What the hell was this guy's plan? Was he looking to go to another team? I mean, who would take him? There's not too many vacancies out there, and he's only ever been with Alpine, and there's not too many better ones out there than Alpine. At least, not ones that need drivers. Yeah, sure, he's got that thing with McLaren as a reserve driver, but they've already secured their drivers. Even if they've been trying to get rid of Daniel Ricciardo. Oh. Yeah, this was about where people were starting to connect the dots. You see, while Daniel Ricciardo is often lauded as one of the better drivers on the grid, aside from his win in the 2021 Italian Grand Prix, he hadn't exactly been hitting his weight in his 2 years at McLaren. Whether it be down to him or the team, the reality was that Zach Brown was looking for a way to not pay the $17 million a year contract, and basically looking for a way to kick him to the curb. The use of language in the media in the Monaco Grand Prix time indicated that they were looking for a new driver. Now, McLaren was signing an array of drivers to their program, and they were also giving tests to the likes of Colton Herta. Now, this hoarding of talent did land them in the spotlight over in IndyCar when they signed defending champion Alex Palou to their team, only for him to also be signed by Chip Ganassi Racing and caused a major uproar with two entities claiming to own the same driver for 2023. Head back over to Europe and the same damn thing is occurring, because not too long after Piastri sent out that tweet, it was being widely rumoured that he was instead going to replace Daniel Ricciardo at McLaren for 2023. But of course, that made no sense, considering that Ricciardo was still under contract until the end of 2023, and that he sent this out via his Instagram stories, stating that he was committed to the team and that through hell or high water, he would try and work out the issues that were at play. Although that does sound like something you would say to your kids after getting off the phone with your divorce lawyers. What few of us knew at that time was that in the days before Ricciardo sent that out, McLaren and Piastri were definitely talking to one another. And so, with this deal being apparently a done thing, there was just the small matter of telling Alpine that he wasn't going to be with them come next year. And he did tell them, several times in fact. Although shortly after the Lord of the Eyebrows jumped ship to Team Stroll, Otmar Safnauer would tell Piastri that the seat was his, conveniently, whilst he was working in the Alpine simulator in front of a few people that were none the wiser to the whole deal. Oscar, realizing the situation at hand, knew what he had to do in that moment. After that ridiculously awkward scenario, he pulled Otmar aside, lent him a copy of the Oxford Dictionary, and guided him toward the word no. He reminded him of the fact that several times beforehand that he would not be racing for them even if they offered him a seat in the main game, a free Alpine road car, a stake in the Renault Group brand, and a timeshare in a Maldives apartment that is about 5 years away from being underwater. But why? After being touted as the future of Alpine, and Alpine dumping so much money into Piastri, why would he abandon ship and head for the refuge of McLaren? Well, at the time, it was expected that Alonso and Ocon would remain at Alpine, and 2 years at a Williams team whose glory days were well behind them, a seat at McLaren looks a lot better to the eye of the average earthling, even if McLaren's better days are behind them as well. And certainly, Piastri, as well as his manager, former F1 driver, World Endurance Champion, and Hugh Jackman cousin Mark Webber, thought so too. Of course, none of this was official yet, only that Oscar had very publicly declared that he would not race for Alpine next year, and Otmar, as well as the rest of the Alpine hierarchy, cracked the about it. They said they expected more loyalty from Oscar, saying that he should have it with that team that has taken him to the World Championship, and above all, that during the last year has put him in a Formula 1 car so that he would be ready, so that he would know the circuits. I expected more loyalty from Oscar than he's showing. I started in 1989 in Formula 1 and I've never seen anything like this. It's not about Formula 1, it's about integrity as a human being. Jesus, Otmar, you speak as if this guy stood you up outside an interstate Wendy's or something. Well, either way you look at it, the matter would be put before the FIA's Contract Recognition Board to determine if Piastri was an Alpine ace or a McLaren man. Eventually, after much deliberation, it was determined that he was a McLaren man, ruling against Alpine, who had, in one fell swoop, lost both Fernando Alonso and Oscar Piastri. Youch. youch. And an even bigger youch was to come when the findings of the board became public, and it was revealed that Alpine had massively dropped the ball. How did they drop said ball? Well, in an extremely basic sense, and even this wouldn't really do it justice, Alpine shipped off a term sheet in November 2021, which they believed was a valid contract between both parties for the purposes of a race roll from 2023 onwards. Although this was merely the intended starting point for negotiations. They would start handing out contracts within 10 working days of the 15th of November. Well, guess what? 15th of November came and went, and nothing. Meanwhile, Alpine's lead of legal affairs was given the workload of a Canadian rugby coach and told Mark Webber that by the time the new Alpine F1 car was launched at the start of 2022, that maybe then that she could have a look at this whole Piastri contract deal. But by the time March rolled around, still nothing. By this time, Webber was getting pissed, as of course were the Piastris, because clearly Alpine were not offering up an answer. By March 4th, Alpine sent Oscar a draft. It was a reserve driver role for 2022. The race role? That wasn't in there. There was no extension option for 2023 for a potential full-time ride. On March 15th, Piastri did receive a contract through his lawyers for a reserve driver role for 2022. Mercer stated that this was an emergency measure, with the season starting just 4 days later and no reserve driver agreement in place. Without a contract in place, Piastri could not be granted a super license for his reserve driver role, which Mercer was aware of. So with no other option, she was forced into treating the term sheet of November 2021 as a binding contract, adding the words legally binding heads of terms to the document. This phrase was not present on the original document sent to Piastri the previous year. Holy sh*. By May 19th, Alpine had sent Piastri a document. It was a proposal, a roadmap for his first few years in Formula 1. It would involve 2 years at Williams before finally joining Alpine in 2025. This wasn't acceptable, and eventually, both Webber and Piastri came to the conclusion that they were gonna look elsewhere. McLaren were keen, signed a preliminary deal on the 3rd of June, before signing a deal for 2023 on the 4th of July, which would come into effect the moment Piastri became a free agent on the 1st of January 2023. And because Alpine never had anything signed with Piastri beyond the end of 2022, they not only lost that CRB appeal, but were also forced to pay the legal costs of every party involved, which basically amounted to over €500,000 in legal fees. There's dropping the ball, and then there's that. And it all came about because Alpine essentially pissed around and left Piastri out in the cold, leaving him frustrated and looking for other options. I mean, could you blame him? And in the end, it's kind of funny. Seb's retirement and Alonso's hard-on for bad career moves had no bearing on where Piastri was going to go for 2023, but it did give us this damn soap opera. And with that, on September 2nd, Oscar Piastri was officially announced at McLaren for the 2023 season. So I guess that video where I begged for the powers that be to give him a ride kind of came to fruition, right? Well, I guess. Not totally in the way that I thought it would, but he is at least at McLaren, so all's well that ends well, right? Well, not so fast on that one. Yes, McLaren have had some great success with rookies. Sir Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris, they come to mind. But they also oversaw the debuts of Jan Magnussen, Michael Andretti, and Stoffel Vandoorne. How did their Formula 1 careers go? Drivers that came in with the legend of John Henry's hammer and left on a whimper. They almost killed the careers of Kevin Magnussen and Sergio Perez. And then you have Daniel Ricciardo, the man who Piastri be replacing. No one saw his downfall coming, but it happened. Kinda have to feel bad for the dude, but as the Honey Badger so admitted, it's the nature of the beast. That is the way with Formula 1. What am I trying to prove here? Other than being less fun than a holiday in Pyongyang. It's that nothing is guaranteed in this sport, especially with McLaren. There's something else too. The revelations of what happened definitely doesn't paint Piastri as the bad guy, but people will think twice before signing this guy in the future. Why? Because the paddock talks. And because it's human nature. It's sad, but true. But hey, the important question, how will Piastri do in his time there? Who knows? Maybe he'll do good, and maybe he'll drown. All I'll say is, welcome to the big time, Piastri.